This episode is proudly sponsored by Amber L. Contact us today to learn how you can be a part of the vibration experience.
Good evening and welcome to Vibration, where we empower individuals to speak their distinct truth, passions, and personal message on a global online stage. I'm your host, Michelle McDonald, passionate foodie, author, and entrepreneur. And tonight we are continuing with our theme of the importance of children's literacy with our topic, the value of English literature. With our guest tonight, Ms. Claudette J. Thompson, who was born in St. Catherine, Jamaica, and has been in the field of education for many years, 33 of which have been spent in the Bahamas, firstly at Prince William's High and currently at Temple Christian High. Claudette has a passion for working with youth and helping those in need. In 2012, Ms. Thompson received a PEP FAR grant from the United States Embassy and successfully organized a national speech competition to promote HIV/AIDS education in the Bahamas. Owing to the success of this competition, Claudette was selected as the chaperone to accompany the first cohort of Bahamian youth ambassadors at the 4-week Bold Leaders Youth Leadership Training held in Colorado and Washington, D.C. She is a lifetime member of the Bahamas Red Cross, a published poet, and an author, public speaker, and mentor. This talented woman has won numerous awards in the performing arts and literary competitions. Some of these include being a 3-time elocution winner at the National Arts Festival, Best Writer Veterans Division in the 2019 Bahamas Poetry Competition, the Laws of Life Poetry Competition winner, and 2-time grant recipient of the Catapult Artist Showcase, a Caribbean artist showcase. Writing has always been one of her passions, and this prolific writer spends time writing prose as well as poetry. She has a collection of published poems, including Queen, Straighten Your Crown, Stop Looking Down, dedicated to females, and printed in Catapult's online magazine, Awakening, Volume 4, and a short story entitled Rake and Scrape Music, a Fusion of Love, published by the University of West Indies Press. During the COVID pandemic and at a time when she is recovering from surgery, Claudette decided to publish a collection of short stories and poems for students in grades 6 through 9. These were not new works, but she decided it was time to introduce a book which she thought would be relevant and helpful to students in the region. Hence, Take the Wheel was published. The writings are simply presented, but the message in each story or poem is very relatable. An added feature of the book is a teaching segment, which introduces students to vocabulary used in the study of literature. Claudette is a member of the Salem Union Baptist Church on Taylor Street, where she has been a camp counselor, a member of Salem's Women in Ministry, as well as written and directed drama productions for the youth department. Her philosophy is, to whom much is given, much is required, and thus she works tirelessly to give back to society. Claudette, welcome to the stage tonight.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's a pleasure being here. It's also an honor. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and we are so happy to have you here with us. Congratulations again on your numerous awards in teaching and writing. Tell us more about your journey to becoming an author.
Well, I have always loved writing. Ever since I was a child, I was encouraged to write a lot. We had a lot of teachers at home, and so we always had to be playing school. And I just enjoyed writing. I think it was born out of also my love for reading. I read a lot, and it's interesting also to note that when I was growing up, reading hymn books was a pastime of mine. I know that sounds weird, but I just loved reading hymn books. And I grew to just love words, the ancient words from the old hymns. Even as a child, I grew up understanding them. And so as time progressed, I started writing. And eventually, I became the writer of our family. When it was a birthday or a funeral, I was the one they called on to write a poem or to write a tribute. And friends used to say, why don't you take this more seriously? You're so good at it. But I never took them on, as they would say. And eventually, I decided to write more, but I would just write them and hide them away. I keep them for personal use. And as I started teaching, I realized that a lot of the writings, the comprehension passages I wanted to introduce to the students, I could not find them in a book. They were either too lengthy or they were not too relevant for the students. And so I just started writing more short stories, more comprehension passages, and I found that my students loved them. And so there began the passion.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate the fact that you thought about your students when it came to your writing. You knew that it was a passion for you, something that you were also very good at, you were known for. And what really pushed you to kind of make that extra step was thinking about your students and how relatable this would be for them and wanting to see their success at the end of the day through your work.
Quite so. They're at the forefront of my mission. And so I always try to engage them. And one way I could engage them was by introducing more literary works to them and more so my own writing. Actually, when I introduced my writing, it gave them the push to also want to write. They realized that I was not trying to get them to do something that I couldn't do myself. And so when they saw how easy it was for me, they said, yes, miss, I could do this too. And out of it, I have had some really, really good writers that I've taught over the many years.
That is so empowering for students to see themselves through you and knowing that they can do something for themselves, that they're talented, because you know, a lot of times students come to school and based on grades, they're not sure how to feel, about themselves, their capabilities. And so being able to find out that they can be writers, that must have been very exciting for them.
Very exciting. And one thing that I found worked for me, sometimes students will write and they're a bit reluctant to share with the class. And I'll encourage them. I say, this is how we learn from each other. And so one day it just dawned on me, why not write on the board? I wrote today and I'm not sure it was good, but I'll read it anyway. And then I would have written something like, I wrote today and I think it's good, so I would like to share it. And I wrote about 5 options. So I said, okay, there are 5 options on the board. Before you begin reading your work, you choose one of those options. And so it empowered even the shyest student, even the most reserved who would not normally want to speak in public, and they became proud. Eventually, their confidence grew and they became proud. Hey, I can write. And even today in my classroom, I have a poster which I made and it's original. I said, there is a writer within each of you. Select the genre you love and unleash it. And so that really, really encourages them because indeed there is a writer in each of us.
Absolutely. I do believe that. And this gives me an extra reason to smile because 2 of the most influential teachers for me, because I'm also a writer. I started writing at a young age. My first poem was when I was 12, and my teachers were a huge inspiration for me during school. And two of them were actually in the English section, and one was extremely encouraging with my poetry. You know, she's like, you should share it. Let's talk about it. And I remember doing one and standing in front of the class, and I really wasn't feeling that confident, but she knew the talent and she wanted me to embrace that. So I love that you're doing that for your students as well.
Awesome. Very good. Congrats on being a writer too.
Thank you. So I know that you have shared with us your journey to writing, and you've written on so many different things. What was the specific inspiration behind your book, Take the Wheel, English Literature Made Simple and Enjoyable?
Okay, Take the Wheel was born out of a need that I'd seen over the years I'd been teaching. And I realized that students needed more books that were relevant to their experiences. I realized that in teaching literature, students sometimes do not understand, especially when you are entering the high school for the first time. You never really did literature at the primary level as a subject. And so when you come to high school and you are seeing the subject on your timetable, and students, a lot of them, they don't like to read. And so they groan and, more reading. And so I actually introduced the book by welcoming students to high school and welcoming them to literature class. And I used the word specifically, well, if you don't like reading, I know you must be groaning right now. But I am here to enlighten you and to make you just love this subject. And so I decided to, in my spare time, write stories and write poems that the students could relate to. The stories in Take the Wheel are about an everyday child in the Caribbean, in the world. The experiences that these children have could happen to just about anybody. So once you take that book up and you read, you say, oh, that's me, that was me, or that's my friend, or I do know somebody like that. And so they just want to read and read. I love the look on my students' faces when they are reading, and before they actually even know I wrote the book. Just last week, a little boy in grade 7 came and he said, oh, you wrote the book? You wrote our literature book? And he started smiling. And I said, do you enjoy reading that book? And he said, oh, yes, I do. And so I have poems that students can relate to, poems about their pets, their Grammy, video games, about the carnival, about being new to high school. I have stories that touch on family relationships, on disobedient children, on parents who try to instill values in their children. And for me, that book is more than a book that can be used in school. Actually, someone who got a copy told me that it could really be a Sunday school manual as well, because of the varying stories and the moral that we can learn from each story. And I really am excited about the book, because I have gotten a very positive response from persons who have already read that book.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Everything that you stated just now, you know, your students' faces lighting right up when they realize that their teacher has written it, because it makes them feel seen. As you stated, a lot of books that are used in high school sometimes can be very dated. And so they don't understand it. They find that it's boring, and they're probably thinking, you know, this author knows nothing about me. So knowing that, you know, their teacher, who they look up to, who inspires them, who motivates them, is the author of the book, helps them to understand the value of reading, get connected to the subject, in connection to what you stated with there being a need. So I thank you for doing that for your students. From everything that you stated already, you've done so much just to empower them in their education, and that's beautiful. So your book highlights critical thinking as a skill which can be learned at any age, and it is indeed one that is needed for early adulthood. What is the value of children understanding this at their age?
Okay, students really need to know how to reason things out. It allows us to be safe.
Yeah.
It allows us to give positive responses, informed responses, and it allows us to wear someone else's shoe, to put ourselves in someone else's shoe and to understand persons, and so to have better relationships, even with our parents and our peers and our teachers. Once we can reason, why did they do that? Why are they telling me to do this? What would have happened had I taken the other route? Critical thinking is very, very essential. And so out of each story, we can get some points of reference where persons will be able to argue a point, to look on a character and say, why did he do this? Why did he act this way? Why not? What if he had done B instead of doing A? And so, as I said before, it keeps us safe too. Should I take this route? Well, mommy says I'm to do this, but I want to do it my way. We have to stop a minute and think, what if I do it my way? What will happen? Is mommy speaking out of experience, or is she speaking because out of some authority, because she's mom and she thinks she must say this? Is she considering my point of view? Am I considering hers? And so out of critical thinking, so much can be learned, and it is very essential. And books, we are born with the skill. We are born. But I think somehow we are born more navigating towards doing the negative things. I don't know if it's because of Adam's sin, but we really, really most times have to push that pause button and think, is this right? Is it true? What did Jesus do? And I like to bounce off the Bible. I'm a Christian and I'm not ashamed to say so. And every story I write has it either spoken out quite loudly or very subtly. But I must promote that this is God's way and this is how we should do things.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I like how you mentioned the ways that critical thinking really comes into play in our everyday lives, and especially for the development of children. Not only is it something that they would need for math and trying to understand, like, how do I solve this problem? But also, as you stated, we always have a choice, right? Freedom of choice.
We do.
And so, you know, even though our parents tell us to do things as kids, as you stated, we always kind of want to try to test that, right? So it's almost like, do I have to? I want to do this. You know, am I going to get in trouble if I do that? And as you stated, that's critical thinking coming into place. And also, we pride ourselves in ensuring that our kids have a sense of individuality. So without exercising that critical thinking muscle, it won't be as easy for them to be able to do that.
And I do think we would have more world peace if persons were to just pause for a minute and look at both sides of the coin. Am I doing this out of selfish motivation? Is it because I want power? Is it because it's the best thing for our territory right now? Is it the best thing for me? I think we really, really need to go back to the basics. And I want to encourage parents at this juncture to allow their children to read aloud for them. I had to read aloud when my parents were in the kitchen preparing a meal or doing the laundry. I stood there with a book and I had to read aloud and they would question me. It's so important that parents take time. It's not only the job of the teacher, it's not only the job of the school. Parents have to find the time, make the time to encourage their children to read aloud and to question them. Question them also about personal things. Question without judging. Allow them to feel free to express their ideas. And this skill would be further developed in the classroom.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. For us, when we had to go to school, one of the things we had to do was read a verse from the Bible out loud. And before we exited the car, we would talk about the verse. So it was my older brother and I for the most part. And then we would do a prayer. So it really instilled in us understanding the Bible and words and stories in a totally different way, because, you know, as you can imagine, some words in the Bible are a bit more advanced for kids, but we weren't scared of learning it. We weren't scared of reading. So I completely understand where you're coming from with encouraging children to want to do that, discover that. And also that very, very special point for parents to really get involved in knowing what their kids want and encourage that individuality.
Very important. And I also think we need to go back to the old days when a physical book was a gift. Now we don't consider books again, or we may consider something on a Kindle. But I think children need a book in their hand, no matter what toy or what piece of clothing or jewelry you want to give them. Parents need to still give them a book. And that is so very important. And reading in the home, the parents ought to lead by example. Their children should see them reading. And also, reading should never, never be considered a punishment. Why are you playing? Go and take up a book and read, as if reading is some kind of punishment. I think we need to move away from that. Children need to see reading as a pleasurable, educational, enjoyable activity. Something that we do when we are on a high, not something we do when we are bored or when somebody forces us to go and take up a book. And there are so many genres. Even a comic. I used to enjoy reading Archie comics. I don't know if they still have them. But Archie, I grew up with Archie, Jughead, Veronica, and Betty. And I learned so much from them, even about relationships. And so we should encourage reading different kinds of genre. That's very good for our children.
Yes. And, you know, that's truly what it's about. So the first thing is changing the narrative around reading, right? So making it enjoyable, fun, fascinating. Like, hey, it's reading time, you know? And then as you stated, introduce all of these other genres so that kids could be like, you know what, I like this genre, I like adventure, I like comic books. And so it encourages them to kind of stay with that, get lost in their imagination, have fun with it, and they're learning at the same time. They don't even realize it, but they're learning.
Right. It's so exciting for them. It becomes so exciting.
Yes. And just as you stated, Archie comic books were gold. I love those.
Yes.
I had a collection. I used to even draw them. It was so fun. We do need to get back to that, because I realized that, and I've always known this, there's such a difference of like feeling the pages between your fingers, you know?
And I used to just love to open a book and see that somebody had written my name to Claudette. And I said, yes, this is mine.
Yes.
And a parent expressed the idea, well, I don't want to buy books because I won't have any space to store them. Eventually, the child should have his or her own personal library, even just one shelf. After a while, we could donate the books. Yes. There are so many homes, so many libraries, so many schools on the family islands too. I'm sure they would love to get books. So as parents, purchase these books. There's no need to worry. Why should we have all these books in the home? Because once your child has read, once he or she has decided these are the ones I want to keep, I could pass these on to someone else who could benefit from them. And so I still say, parents, buy your child a book. Birthday, Christmas is coming up. Buy your child a book.
I agree. And I buy books as gifts for like my nephew and my godkids.
Awesome.
So I totally agree with the idea. And they love it. They love seeing the pictures. They love seeing the covers. They just love it all. And honestly, You never know the difference one book can make.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely. So there is another skill that your book introduces, which is reading comprehension. And for those of us who don't understand the difference, can you tell us what is the difference between reading comprehension and reading, and why it's important to learn this?
Okay. We can have oral reading as a skill by itself, where we're just testing a child on how well they pronounce words, how fluently they read, do they understand a simple word. I could just pick out vocabulary arbitrarily and just ask them the meaning of the word without it having to have a connection with anything else. But reading comprehension as a subject in school and as a particular skill demands that the student not only be able to call words, not only be able to read fluently, but that they understand in depth what it is that they have read. So they should be able to analyze what is the writer saying. Is there any hidden meaning behind a word? Did the writer use figures of speech? Any kind of literary devices? Is the writer being sarcastic? And usually a good comprehension passage, a good reading comprehension passage begins with simple questioning, recall questioning, where you can just ask, who are the main characters? What is the setting? Where did the story take place? Simple questions. And then it slowly begins to develop into more complex, more inferential questions, where the child now has to read between the lines. And I smile when I hear that phrase, because when I was in high school and my teacher kept saying, read between the lines, read between the lines, I kept saying, but there's nothing between the lines. She never took time to explain what it meant. Is the writer subtly saying something? Is the writer suggesting something by the use of certain words or phrases? And so as we develop our reading comprehension skills, these are the things that we need to look into. These are the skills that students will develop as they continue reading and comprehending, understanding. And it's also important that they understand certain phrases: quote, list, explain. So they will know that when they're answering a comprehension question, they should use their own words as far as possible, unless they are told to quote. That means to use the exact words of the writer and to enclose it in quotation marks. When they're asked to explain, they need to pick out keywords and put them in simple language. So these are words that students will come to learn as they do more and more reading comprehension passages.
Thank you for that definition. And that really goes to show how extremely valuable this is, because not only would it help them with exams and tests, but it helps them a lot with conversation. So when they are speaking with their parents or with their friends, they can use these phrases that they learned. Can you explain that to me? When they see lists, they understand what that means. And it also helps them to connect with the true meaning of the book or story that they're reading, because they're able to actually pick up on the tone of the character and understand the descriptive aspects of it. And so it truly, truly is something that lasts throughout their lifehood and also throughout their schooling. Being able to understand how to fill out any exam question from this point, because they get the meaning behind these key phrases and these key words. So we are having a little technical difficulties. I know that our guest is going to be back. This is such an enlightening, empowering, and inspiring conversation. I am so excited to be able to share this with the audience tonight. And highlighting all of these amazing benefits for kids to get into reading, understanding what the story is about, being able to expand their imagination, their love, their passions. Claudette being very engaging when it comes to letting students know that there are writers in all of them and giving them that sense of confidence and hope and ability that they can do so much more. From the stories that they've read, they too can share their own story, create a book, and leave a mark on the world despite their age. So if you are enjoying this episode, you can leave a comment in the chat and we will highlight that. If you are watching the replay, you can do the same thing and we would be so delighted to see your comment and highlight that. One of the things that I really appreciate that in this episode is having a sense of nostalgia. Remembering when I was a kid and I'd be huddled up under the sheets with my flashlight, reading some of my favorite books, getting lost in them. I absolutely loved vocabulary words. That was one of the biggest things for me to look forward to. And so books were not just an escape into, someplace that was fun and creative and extraordinary, but it was also a way to improve my reading and my writing, which were two things that I love to do. And so books mean a lot to me. As a kid, I did it a lot. My siblings as well. It's something that we all continue to do. And so I understand the value of critical thinking and reading comprehension, as Claudette has shared with us, and knowing how exactly it comes into place and stays with us throughout our adulthood. And we rarely ever lose that love for reading. It continues to grow in different ways. We enjoy different genres. We find characters that we absolutely can't let go. We start to become addicted to series with different volumes. And it's really such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So to echo Claudette's words, I do encourage you all to buy a book for a child that you know. You never know how it's going to impact their lives, really enlighten them, educate them, inform them, and give them the skills that in a relatable way so that they can cherish that and keep that throughout. So I'm not sure if Claudette is able to come back, but I do wanted to give a special thank you for her being on our show tonight. Her work as a teacher and author speaks volumes into how much she truly cares about children, their education, progress throughout life. Her book, Take the Wheel, English Literature Made Simple and Enjoyable, not only introduces them to the subject of literature, but also to two key life skills that are forever beneficial: reading comprehension and critical thinking. The importance of these two things cannot be said enough. For this, we thank her. To purchase a copy of her book, you can visit her on Amazon.com, where it's available in Kindle or as a paperback. As a reminder, this episode is proudly sponsored by Amber L. A special thank you to our audience for watching, and to our guest speaker, Claudette J. Thompson, for making an incredible impact through her teaching and writing. I invite you all to follow me for show updates and tune in next week for another episode of Vibration, where we raise your frequency and amplify your truth. Good night, everyone.